ladies and gentlemen, we are in this segment of the show. We are joined by our person in the place d'honneur, place of honor, Justin Fain. Justin Fain and I attended Maranatha Baptist Bible College, now Maranatha Baptist University, in Watertown, Wisconsin, in the early 2000s. I know we don't look it, but we are that old. And this is my first guest on the show. I've asked several people to come on, and I'm trying to stack these up to be pretty fun. But I love these conversations. I love these conversations with people that I knew in the past and asking about their journey and where they ended up. I am fascinated by them because everyone is kind of scattershot. There's no average, road that's traveled, and certainly no common destination. And so I'm really interested to get into this, and I'll go ahead and start off here by asking Justin to tell us a little bit about himself, your background, where you grew up, your experiences, your motivations, your heroes, and really up until the point where you attended college, I would say. So take it away, my man.
Sure thing, and I've got to be careful because there's so many little segues that you can go on with the journey.
Segues, we love.
So we'll stick to the facts. So I live in High Point, North Carolina. I've born and raised North Carolina. The only time I was really out of the state, as far as like living, was at Maranatha, Pensacola Christian College. I was there for 3 years before they asked me to leave as well, and so. And then my wife and
why? What's the story there? Like, why you can't just glaze over that.
If you don't want to share, you don't have to.
Oh, no, okay. I'm an open book.
We'd love to know.
I'm an open book. So, and again, anyone that's familiar with Bob Jones or the PCCs of the world, like this isn't a surprise. To the average person, this makes no sense at all. I was off campus with a member of the opposite sex without the proper chaperone or approvals. That was it, really.
They kicked you out for that?
Oh yeah,
I can see that.
It was going to be a culmination of things, but
yeah, it's usually because Maranatha wouldn't have kicked you out for that. You would need more.
No,
Maranatha was this fresh air haven.
It's okay
compared to Pensacola.
Really?
I told y'all Pensacola was crazy, and you didn't believe me.
I'm telling you.
Like Bob Jones, and I was like, it's
How
worse.
do you be so jealous of people who went to Pensacola?
I mean, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like they did a lot of things good. I mean, the teachers were awesome. The programs were good. The food was good. The campus was beautiful. But I actually used to use a passage of scripture that said, paraphrasing, that the outside of the cup was beautiful, but the inside was full of dead men's bones. And that's the way I always describe. I think it was in Psalms or something. That's why I would describe it, because it looked good, but there was a lot of junk. But yeah, I was essentially, you weren't allowed to leave campus really at all with a member of the opposite sex unless you had an approved chaperone, which was basically teachers. And now in all fairness, yeah.
Wait, teacher, other students couldn't be chaperones?
No way. And
wow.
If you really want to get a shock, let's say you took your date to a restaurant, and of course the chaperone's coming with you. You were expected to pay for the chaperone.
This sounds just like a giant scheme for the staff to get free food.
Yeah.
Just force them.
Those were their benefits for working there. Yeah. So it was, and that's why I said going to Maranatha, I was like, man, this place is awesome. But now, and in all fairness, like I knew I was breaking the rules when we did that. And the fact of the matter is I really should have gotten asked to leave my freshman year. I made it to the end of my junior year. And I made it through Maranatha doing the same thing, leaving campus with the ladies. And, I survived. But, anyway, so I grew up in North Carolina. I attended Gospel Light Christian School in Walkertown, North Carolina, of brother Bobby fame, Steve Robertson fame. Those are a couple names that a lot of folks in the South know. Went there from kindergarten till 12th grade. It was the whole time. Similar to what you said, Carla. For college, Pensacola was a no-brainer because it was cheap. And it was cheap. It was near the beach, but it was also cheap. I mean, you could go there for $5,000 a year. I mean, it was nothing.
insane.
Yeah. It was, and I know Bob Jones wasn't terrible, but it was less than that. That's part of the reason I didn't go to Bob Jones, is because it was more affordable.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, and then Maranatha was sticker shock because it was a lot more expensive.
Maranatha was way more than $5,000 a year, folks. Yeah. Maranatha was more than double that. So yeah,
it was. But so went to Pensacola 3 years after getting kicked out. And this is fun. I'll withhold names, but actually, me and the female that we both got kicked out. We both came to Maranatha. And so we both went there and graduated.
Do I know her?
You should. You would.
Tell me offline then. Sometimes I didn't know that.
But I met my wife there though, and we've been married almost 19 years. And so, despite my departure and major change of lifestyle, so it can happen for anyone that's in the predicament of going, "Hey, me and my wife or me and my husband don't align on this." It is possible to be true to yourself and still have a strong relationship. So I went into ministry. So outside of college, just a few things. I was a youth pastor for a couple years. I taught in a Christian school. That was at Salem Baptist School in Winston, in North Carolina. My wife and I, right after we got married, we actually went overseas and taught in a missionary school on the island of Saipan. Which a lot of people haven't heard of Saipan. If you've heard of Guam, it's like its next door neighbor. It's right next to Guam. Taught there. I was actually a youth pastor during my journey out. Now I don't want to go too deep here, but I love the fact, because I've met both of you for the first time, Kai and Carla. I didn't just depart from the IFB. I departed religion entirely. So I am an atheist. And so, like, for me, it wasn't just hop and ship from the independent fundamental Baptist movement. I hopped real far and hard. And that process actually started when I was a youth pastor, very heavily engaged in church. So, and then I'm here now.
Yo, all right. I don't know who has the second question, but I want to do these follow-ups real quick. Surprise, I know. But, go
Can
ahead,
I just say one thing? I would just like to point out, Justin, that I think you might be the only previous youth pastor on the planet that TJ likes.
Oh my God! I have youth pastor written down right here. I have youth pastor written down.
They are like anti-youth pastor around here, and I will die on this hill that not every youth pastor is a dirty creep, because I had a really incredible one when I lived in Georgia, and I contribute. I give him so much credit for so much. And TJ and Carl and Kayla are like, "Where?" And so I was trying to point out that Justin over here was a youth pastor, and we like him. That not all youth pastors are creepy and weird. Justin, you're my hero, and you didn't even know it.
Hey, it's really simple. You just don't molest children. It's really,
I know, right? It's not hard, folks. It's a high bar.
It's not hard.
It's not.
Look. I am 0% surprised that that's what Kai said, because I can't tell you how many times I've shit on youth pastors in this show,
every episode,
in group text, every episode, we do it all the time.
Group text. And I'm like, they're not all bad. I had a really great one, so every time we talk about it, I'd have to be like, "Not my youth pastor," and Kayla's like, "No," and I'm like,
#, not my youth pastor.
Yeah. That's so funny.
But I'd like to point out, Justin, you should feel honored. You're probably the only one TJ likes.
Hey,
awesome.
Listen, I got it. Also, I wanted to go back. I am amazed that Pensacola had stricter rules than Maranatha. Now, this is funny too, because when I went to Maranatha, I remember a lot of the students there complained about the rules, and they said how they missed high school, which was just mind-blowing to me, because first off, I hated high school. I hated every fucking day of it. I couldn't wait to leave that place. And it was weird seeing people nostalgic for high school. And second, I had the same thought you did. Maranatha seemed like a breath of fresh air to me as far as the freedom and stuff. And I assumed I knew there were stricter colleges, but I assumed that the bigger ones were almost necessarily less strict just because it'd be harder to enforce all those rules. So Maranatha had like 1,000 people. Like Pensacola, I mean, I imagine it was easily 5-6 times bigger, if not more. And so I'm kind of surprised to hear that the rules were stricter, but glad it was load off your back there. And the third thing I want to mention here is you mentioned you were on Saipan, which is near Guam, as Justin mentioned. And this has nothing really to do with what you talked about, but it's something that I thought was funny, that Guam is weird. I've never been there, but I've talked to a lot of people who have, and that it's like when people that are, there, they don't refer to it as like in Guam. They don't say like, I'm in the United States or I'm in Spain. They say on Guam because it's an island, and so they refer to it on Guam. So it's weird. And then let me get this right. The native people of Guam are called Chamorros, and the expats, or the people who are immigrated there, are called Guamanians. And those two words are very funny to me because Guamania sounds like a disease. Guamania sounds like you got sick and like, oh, I caught Guamania. And Chamorro sounds like a dessert or something, like an Italian dessert. So, yeah, exactly. And so that's all I want to say about that. But thank you for that, Justin.
And it's also interesting too, because being there as an American, you're considered a local, which you're halfway around the world. It's almost on the exact opposite side of the world. And for my wife and I's first anniversary, we stayed at this gorgeous resort. We got a local discount.
Oh, weird.
I wasn't going to argue it, but it's very strange. But.
Hey, God bless American colonialism, right? I mean, it benefits us in so many great ways. And Guam is like shockingly small too. Like, you could like bike ride around it in no time or something. But anyway, yeah. Say what?
So that's crazy.
Yeah. All right, who's up next for the J-Man here?
Oh, me. Listen, now we bonded over Youth Pastor stuff. I'm never letting TJ live this down, just so like the record's really clear. I will remember this episode for forever. Because if he thought you were creep, and also, you know what? I'm gonna go out on a limb because I can't let this go. I'm gonna go out on a limb and bet like $5 that he never once like made comments about his wife in front of a group.
Did you ever say smoking hot wife?
My smoking hot wife.
Oh my goodness.
No, I don't think.
Not all youth pastors.
Yeah.
Not all youth pastors.
I mean, my mouth would constantly get me in trouble. So I would say all kinds of like inappropriate things, like in youth group and stuff, but not like weird inappropriate. It was just jokes that the kids would laugh at,
Yeah.
No, I don't think I ever. And my wife was usually, there with us. I don't remember saying that, but I may have.
Look,
he might remember.
Good youth pastor men exist. Just for the record.
And TJ knows my wife too. I said we met at Maranatha, but now you were closer with her oldest brother.
Yeah, David. I knew David.
Yeah, because we all worked security together. You remember that?
Yep, sure did.
Yeah.
TJ used to be a bouncer, huh?
Well, no, it was campus security. It was locking doors basically, and running from the ghosts in the main building,
and stealing milk and food from the cafeteria in the middle of the night.
Oh God, yeah, stealing cookies in the cafeteria and soda if you wouldn't get it splattered everywhere. And on the cold nights, the girls would give you like hot chocolate and pastries and stuff if you were working on the girls' side of campus. And whenever people, at least in the early days, whenever people would come off work, a lot of college students work at like, Wendy's or Pizza Hut or Burger King. They'd bring back all the food they didn't have. Those are the days. Yeah. That's before they started making everything fresh to order. Remember at McDonald's used to have like that chute where they drop like 10 burgers and they just grab one for you. Back in those days, when they close up, they'd have like 30 burgers left over. But then they stopped doing that. So yeah. Look at Kai's face.
But I love that journey.
They were good times, all right. Back in the pioneer days, we enjoyed it.
Good old mom and pop. Okay, I guess I wanted to ask, what are some? Because obviously we're all IFB backgrounds, right? But I feel like the IFB varies in little tiny ways. What would you say were some like traditions or rules or whatever that was completely normal for you that people who are not part of the IFB or have never been a part of it would be like, what the actual heck are you talking about? So was there anything that stands out that like, or that like as you stepped away from it, that you were like, I can't believe I actually used to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they probably would have said what the actual heck if they were in the so that is probably I'm teasing. So, I mean, there's the normal things, that you don't go to the movie theater and women don't wear pants and King James only and music can't have any kind of beat to it at all. I mean, all that stuff is pretty common. I think probably, and I'm going to jump back to Pensacola. One of the rules that I like when I try to explain to somebody what kind of place that was, as far as rule craziness, one of my favorite ones, they had a rule. The first part makes more sense than the other, but it doesn't really. No physical contact between men and women at all. Mm-hmm. But there was also what was called indirect contact. Oh. So if I'm a dude and the lady's got a pencil and she taps me on the shoulder, that's treated with the exact same severity. So the girl that my girlfriend at the time that we got kicked out together, we got what was called socialed at one point, where it means you can't talk to, and I think Bob Jones had something similar. I think you couldn't talk to any member of the opposite sex for like 2 weeks or whatever. Now, TJ, you mentioned like with a larger school how they enforce the rules. It's really quite simple. You just have a lot of minions. They're really bought in and really susceptible to like power tripping, because there's just this competition to try to catch people doing something wrong or being somewhere they weren't supposed to be at any given time. And so, there were a lot of people that were like that just because they thought it would elevate, and it did. I mean, they elevated, they became dorm supervisors or eventually the dean of men, if they turned enough people in. So again, similar things to Bob Jones, but I think the indirect contact thing, I know Bob Jones had white glove and stuff like that. It was just like, and they would jokingly call it Pensacola concentration camp was one of the nicknames they gave it. But I don't know. That one's probably the one that like pops to mind right away. And growing up in it, and let's see, Carla, you said you grew up in it, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And TJ did. Kai, you did as well. Mm-hmm. So you do. It's almost like Stockholm syndrome. Like you get used to it. Like it doesn't seem that big of a deal. And fortunately,
normal.
Yeah, it's just normal. Fortunately, my parents were never as. I mean, they were good Christians. They believed the Bible and they would go to church, but they didn't really buy into some of those extremes. We went to the theater; they were cool with that, even though the school said not. My mom, all my friends in high school thought my mom was cool because she like listened to Aerosmith and stuff. And so they didn't feel the same way about music. They weren't against women wearing pants. So it's like I had home life that was like a little more like free, and you could be a little more open minded about things. But still in like a Christian environment. And then you'd go to school and it was like, you kind of had to put on a different hat,
God,
very cool.
Yeah. Wow. I'd never heard of the indirect contact one. That's a new one even for me.
No?
That is, no, we never had that. I mean, I can't think of any examples. I mean, I can't. Like, I can't think of any examples.
We didn't have that either. As strict as Boston was, I've never heard of that. That's insane.
I was like having panic attacks at Maranatha when I got there because there's like people like hugging and high fiving, and I'm just like, oh! Like I was having like war flashbacks or something because I'm like, you can't do that. What are you doing?
What if like? Yeah, that's incredible. I'm trying to think of some ways like that that wouldn't possibly work. Like when you're sitting on the same bench or something, does that count as indirect contact?
No, that's a good point. But no, that was allowed. I think it was more. It had to be a movable object that you touch someone else.
You might get a girl pregnant if you touch them with a pencil, dude.
Yeah. What is it? The six?
Gotta leave room for Jesus. I was thinking this existential. Did you guys ever? Because I think we all went to like Christian schools / like Christian academies, like Christian colleges. Do you guys ever have where you had to like guys would be in the front and girls would be in the back and like the chaperones in the middle, or like hand checks or
hand
checks for sure,
which make no sense. who's gonna like crap? They got us, and you hold your hand up, holding the girl's hand or whatever.
They've done that for us, especially like if we're coming back late from like a youth activity.
Yeah.
Lights on the bus, and they're like hand check. We're like, you can't even see our hands. What are you talking about?
Hey, I didn't know what you meant, Kai, when you said hand check. Like I was thinking like basketball, like it's a rule like hand check.
You like put your hands up in the air, and you're like,
yeah, I'd never heard of that one.
Yep,
that's a new one.
Yeah.
You mentioned so KJV only. So Pensacola was KJV only at the time, if I remember right. Because Maranatha, once again, Maranatha wasn't like I'm making Maranatha sound really cool. It wasn't, but I'm making it sound really cool. But when I was in high school, two of my friends and I had like a little Bible studies we hold together, and I was about 16 years old, and we were talking amongst ourselves about how the KJV only thing people had made no fucking sense whatsoever, like 0 sense. Like we talked about, it's indefensible, and the KJV always has authorized version written on it. Authorized by a guy who's been dead for 400. Who gives a fuck? Who cares? Like, it's so weird that people put all this stock into it. Now, as I've mentioned many times, it's still my favorite version of the Bible. I love hearing it just because of the poetry and how it sounds.
I'm glad you knew what I was going to say.
Oh yeah, but I mean, assigning some special significance to it as if it's just inherently better than other versions, nonsense. It's a version like anything else, and it's really weird that they focus on. But that was a rule that I couldn't believe they still had at Pensacola in the early 2000s. That was wild. And the other rule that makes sense, you brought up movie theaters. I never understood that rule. Never. Like why that was a big deal. Maranatha, that was like a 50 demerit offense, being caught at a movie theater. And when I was a kid, I would ask about this and like, oh, what ruins your testimony? Yeah, really? Then I realized that these people still think like in the 1950s where like kids go to movie theaters to get busy or something in the dark. Like, that's what they're thinking. And they kind of just stuck with them. And I was like, okay, now this is even dumber. But yeah, so I'm glad you brought those up. Those are pretty great.
Yeah, or that movie theaters still have like, one room just for like pornographic.
Oh, porn. You know what? Oh, yeah.
Like that was a thing. Yeah, I guess maybe still is in big cities, but like
really?
I never thought about movies.
I didn't either. I never thought about that.
Growing up as a Christian, because when I was little, I remember my mom got in trouble for taking my brother and I to see Hunchback of Notre Dame or whatever. But it's because the church or our pastor said that it was giving money to Hollywood, and Hollywood is the devil. So I just assumed, like at Bob Jones, you weren't. I think now you can. Yeah, now you not the theater, but you can go to like an actual theater and
damn,
people, right? But when I was at Bob Jones and like Wicked was out or the Book of Mormon or any other musical, we weren't allowed to go see it because it was again like giving in to Hollywood and all this stuff. And I'm like, this is art. We are a liberal art school. What do you mean?
Well, that excuse is a lot better than the one I heard. So like not giving money to Hollywood, like, yeah, okay, that I kind of get that. We were the thing that I always heard, and like my basketball coaches would say this, where people don't know what you're going to see. Yep. And so you could be going to see, whatever, some terrible movie, which always struck me as like, you know what, like there should be a little more positive intent, like amongst believers. Like, if I want to watch something, there's a thing called the internet, and I can just do that whenever I want. Like that kind of just before the internet, maybe, but I don't know. I think that's a better reason.
I've always wondered how they handle like the music thing in the days of like modern technology. Because like when we went, you had like turn in all your CDs to get checked. Now, what are they gonna do? Everyone show me your phone? Like no, it's like there's no way to check this stuff whatsoever. And I wanted to say too about they got mad. You went to watch Hunchback of Notre Dame. Listen, I kind of get that. So one of my things about Hunchback of Notre Dame is that there's like 3 songs in that movie about how Frollo was just bricked the fuck up for Esmeralda. Like the entire time, he's just singing about how horny he is for Esmeralda. It's like, oh, I want to fuck this gypsy so bad. I was like, this is a weird, like, he's all like turning about his burning desire. Like there's literal fire. It's like, okay, this is like, I love this film, but yeah, weird avenue Disney went down here. Was like, oh my god! But anyway,
it's such a good movie.
It's a great.
It's one of my favorites.
You do. But the music's fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, all of it's so good. I love Disney anyways. But I think it's funny that because I hadn't even remembered about not being allowed to go to movie theater. But now that you say it, I remember asking my dad growing up, and I was like, "Why can't we go? Like everyone gets to go." And he told me because people driving by might see our car and they wouldn't know which film we were there to see, and so it was like ruining like our testimony or whatever. And I remember being 18, like having gotten kicked out, right? And I was like, I can wear pants. Like wearing pants for the first time, I felt so like dirty and like shamed for like wearing pants. But then like I remember being at the movie theater and I was like, I hope my parents don't drive by the movie theater to see my car. Like,
aww.
So it's funny that you said that. So anyway, I can relate to the movie theater thing.
And there's so much like conspiracy theory. It's very much like, someone's going to see you or someone's going to watch you. And then somebody, which brings in the shame and the guilt pieces, which you have to.
It's so
yeah.
And it's so weird because like they have such a hold on you that when you do leave the IFB, you don't have any friends. You don't have any connections. You don't have anyone to like tie yourself back to because they're not allowed to talk to you anymore because you're a sinner. Because they want to conveniently leave out of the Bible where, Jesus sat with sinners, but what?
Right. And then it's the whole love you, don't love the sin type situation.
Super, super non-toxic. We love it. But I guess that kind of leads into my like other question that I had for you is like, when did you first start seeing like red flags? Like, when did you first start seeing things and we're like,
Yeah. Well, all the rule things, that we've already talked about, like none of those things were ever really red flags. It was just kind of like, I go to this school, they can make the rules. I don't agree with them. I may not like them. Me getting kicked out of Pensacola, I deserved it. I broke the rule. It was for what I would say is a dumb reason, but I knew the rule. Like I knew I broke it. It wasn't like I made a mistake and didn't realize it. For me, I would say like red flags, and this would be kind of more of my deconversion story. The two things that were always the major hangups for me that led me to leaving the faith would be slavery in the Bible. And really just the whole Old Testament.
The entire Old Testament,
Pretty much all of it. And to be even more specific, the Bible, like, when I was mentioning earlier, just the, not necessarily there having to be a major event happen. When I stopped making excuses for certain questions and certain things, and I started just like facing the hard facts. It was really like reading the Bible itself that made me go, I can't justify this anymore. In youth group, I would joke about it. I would make it a joke, and I would tell the kids anytime like we're having conversation and Old Testament would come up, I'd go, you know the rule. Like we don't mess. By the way, the church that I was a youth pastor at was not an IFB church. At all. So that's an important clarification because I wouldn't have lasted long if it was. But it was actually, they had a band and, it was more progressive versions of the Bible. Wasn't a big deal. So
not
I
a
was
band.
I know, with drums. It was crazy. Funny enough, that reminds me, my in-laws had come to visit us. And this was many years ago. They came to visit us and they came to our church. And I told my wife, who grew up in a very conservative kind of IFB environment, and her parents still are, growing up in that, when her parents came to visit, we were really concerned because we thought, man, they're not going to like this music, and they're not KJV only, but like KJV mostly. And so they came to that morning service, and then they told us that they would not be returning because the music just was so, just too much.
Good.
And and I just remember being really offended by that because I'm like, you know what? Like, you can't just set that aside to like spend time with your, daughter and son-in-law. Like, that really bugged me. But their commitment was just so strong on it.
Wait, they as in not returning to the church or not returning to see you?
Oh, the church. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
They didn't ban me. Yeah.
That's what I thought. Whoa. That's pretty extreme.
They said, funny enough, my wife and kids are actually up visiting them right now. I wasn't able to go for a few different reasons, but they just didn't want me there. They said you can't come.
What you mentioned. So This one, I don't know if this, I guess it was part of my journey like everyone else's too, but the slavery in the Bible thing, this one, I mean, I know we've, like back in the Facebook days, I remember we would be in these discussions too, because the answer was always the same. Whenever you bring it up, you'd say, hey, you know about the slavery in the Bible? First thing people would say, well, it wasn't slavery, it was indentured servitude. Then you had to teach them what their own holy book says because they didn't know. And it's like, no, you know, it's indentured servitude. For those you don't know, the system of slavery in the Old Testament worked like this, is that you were allowed to enslave Hebrew males as indentured servants for 7 years. Like say they had to pay back a debt or something, which is weird that it's always 7 years, no matter what the debt is. I thought that was kind of odd. Like you'd think there'd be different lengths of time, but no.
Levels.
And you were allowed to enslave female Hebrew slaves as long as you wanted. Like they were yours for life. And you could enslave foreigners for life. And the foreigners, that if they had kids, those kids were also your slaves. Now, your male slaves that you had indentured servants, you had to let them go in 7 years unless they married a female slave, the one you own forever. And so he's been married to this lady for, 6 or 7 years. And then when it's time to go, you're like, oh, you want to stay with your family, do you? And he says, yeah, I do. Then you put a golden earring in and you own him for life too. That's the system. Like that is the system of slavery. And then when you explain like, oh, well, God says to treat them like family. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's not there either. It is. So that one is like what got me was not only the system of slavery that is set up, is that people just didn't know. They didn't bother to learn about it. And automatically, like you said, they automatically had excuses for it. Now, that didn't lead me away from Christianity. Ultimately, it was other stuff too. But I get annoyed when people are like vociferously arguing for something and haven't done the research on it. It kind of bothers me. But yeah, glad you brought that up.
The fact that there's rules about how you can beat your slaves, and
yes.
You can beat them as long as you don't kill them. Things like this. And it's like this doesn't sound like indentured servitude. And I also remember growing up too, like, when they would talk about putting the marking or the earring or whatever in your ear. And it was always used as like this beautiful example of like, we're, we're like, servants for Christ. And, you're commanded to love your masters, which also just is like a way to say.
And that's in the New Testament.
And that's in the New
Testament.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when people pull that, well, that was in the Old Testament. Jesus never said, hey, Bible 2.0, that other stuff. Yeah, that's not the case anymore. We're changing that. He said, I'm here to fulfill the law, not to abolish it. So, yeah. Now, slavery was one of them. The concept of hell was another one that really I just always struggled with. I believed in it. I believed in a literal burning hell, but I just really struggled. And it was actually reading some of Rob Bell's work. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Rob Bell. No. He was a big deal back in maybe like 2010. He had a series called Pneuma. And they were just short, really well done, well produced videos. But he came out with a book called Velvet Elvis. That may sound familiar.
That does, yeah.
Velvet Elvis. He basically came out and said that he didn't necessarily believe in hell. And I remember reading that, and what he said, I so agreed with, is he said, if Christ died on the cross, as a gift for everyone to save everyone from hell, he has failed miserably, because how many millions are still going to hell despite the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ? What Rob Bell proposed is he thought that the idea of Christ dying on the cross and literally saving everyone, whether they accepted him or not, was actually a more honorable and sacrificial gift. It was actually salvation that worked. And I was really like drawn to that idea. Now, I couldn't talk about it with any of my like family or friends because they would have cast me out as a heresy. But it was really Old Testament slavery, hell. Those were the things that were the red flags to me, that I was never satisfied with the answers that I got, that ultimately pulled me out of not just the movement, but really church specifically.
Yeah. I hadn't read that book or anything, but I have heard about like the concept of like Christ's like unconditional atonement and everything. That it makes sense to me, honestly. Like, it actually does. Like, if a human sacrifice is to actually save people from damnation, it would make more sense if it was everyone. But yeah, that's interesting. And Velvet Elvis sounds familiar. But it's like a cartoon character or something. It's weird, but it's like, but sorry. All right. I don't know who's up next here. I think it's you, Carla, right? You have the next question?
I think that question was already asked. It was the whole what circumstances, I guess, led to you leaving the fundamental.
Okay. All right, cool.
And I made what's that I wouldn't even ask. So
that's all right. No,
keep talking.
That's about the journey. So like the circumstances. So you said that it was a few things like the concept of hell and slavery and everything like that. How did that journey go? So like for mine was essentially the catalyst was the finding out about the construction of the New Testament canon. That's really what kicked things off for me. Mm-hmm. How long because you said you jumped right into atheism, which that's surprising. Like it took me like 7 years to realize I was an atheist. I was still a deist for a long time. Like, what was your journey like?
Well, and you're right. The some of the books that I read, like misquoting, I really like Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman's
great. Mm-hmm.
Misquoting Jesus and how Jesus became God. Jesus Interrupted. I'm working on Jesus Interrupted actually right now. I haven't finished that one yet, but there was one particular book. You know, as I was kind of asking these questions and kind of self-reflecting, and really just kind of checking my own kind of spiritual pulse. There was a book called "Why I Became an Atheist" by John W. Loftus. It's a pretty popular book. That name pops up quite often. And that was like the first book that I actually had the guts to like read, where I'm like going into it like I'm disarming a bomb because I know because John Loftus was a pastor and I think he may have actually been in the IFB. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going into this territory and I'm reading someone's account who may have a very similar background to me. And I realized going into that it could very well kind of tip the scale, so to speak. I never was a deist. I was independent fundamental Baptist Christian, and then was an atheist.
Wow.
I realized I didn't believe it anymore. Now, it didn't happen overnight.
Right.
Matter of fact, I think I still vividly recall, driving down the road and just bawling and praying to God, the ball's in your court. Like I'm at a pivotal moment and I'm still talking to God. So like clearly there's somewhat of a belief there. Right. And so, it's like, and I get asked this question, occasionally from my friends and my family, what is it that would convince you to believe again? And my answer honestly just has to be, I don't really know. I can't really think of anything, but God should know.
Yeah.
And if he wants me to know, then he has the ability to convince me. If the Apostle Paul could have a Damascus Road experience, then he's got no excuse to not do something like that, for me. John W. Loftus was definitely a big influence why I became an atheist. Once I prayed those prayers to a God that I was slowly losing belief in, and nothing happened, nothing changed. And so I said, well, I think that's it. I think that's all.
Wow.
And so, that's the way it worked. Now, you mentioned something earlier, TJ, that kind of made me chuckle, and I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but it was the idea of being mad at God versus like not believing in God.
Yeah.
I talk to myself a lot. You wouldn't believe that the way I talk in front of other people. But there are times where, okay, I'll use a very personal example, but one that I don't mind sharing. My sister passed away about 1.5 years ago. She was 7 years younger than me. She was a devoted Christian. She passed away 7 days after giving birth to her first child. Her husband, they'd only been married for about 1.5 years. She went to mission fields. She, dedicated her life to Christ. She went on so many missions trips, gave. She worked at her church like it was a full-time job. And she gave birth and passed away after having her first child. There are times where I say, fuck God. Mm-hmm. There are times I'll just say that or think things like that because I'm angry. I don't believe, I'm not convinced God exists. Yeah. But the God that I used to believe in and I'll even think on the off chance I'm wrong and there is one, I'm okay saying this because it's a therapeutic thing. And so, but that was something you mentioned that was kind of interesting, where it's like, being mad at God, but how do you be mad at God if you don't believe in God? I think it's actually possible. It's the same as me being mad at Voldemort for what he did to Harry's parents. Screw Voldemort.
It's it's and like I said too, it's like it's easy, like if you haven't had that experience, something like that, to actually have those feelings. Oh no,
sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right, there we are.
Oh, my back. Okay, cool.
I thought.
Sorry about that.
God may have tried to smite you.
Yeah, he's like, I'm here, bitch.
Oh no.
No, but yeah, like going through this, you never know how you're going to react, and so I do understand that as well. The concept of hell, that's an interesting one, because that happened. That was one of your first problems, right? Because what I'm trying to think about here is that, if I put an example for me, when I first lost my faith in Christianity, I still believed, like, I had to look at the trees argument type of thing. I was like, okay, well, why is there something other than nothing? It just kind of makes sense if something out there, some divine artificer, some prime mover put all this together. And I kind of went down there. I didn't believe in hell or anything, though, because every now and again, I'll still run across atheists who still have like this lingering fear of hell. And also, too, we didn't go over this, but even the concept of hell itself has just evolved so much over time that, if you actually like go back to the origin of the Christian faith, they didn't have anywhere near the same concept of hell. This is amazing, but a lot of our concept of hell comes from Dante's fucking Inferno, which is insane to think about. That book's only a few hundred years old, but it's kind of wild about that. So did that ever creep up on you or anything?
Oh yeah, for sure. And actually, I want to pause real quick and say something.
Sure.
TJ, I've known you for a long time. Carla, I've just met you an hour ago. I went through the journey and believed. I was a genuine believer. My mother-in-law doesn't think so. She said you were never saved because it's impossible to be saved and lose your salvation. I understand that theology. I say if it was possible to be saved, I was, because I truly believed. And anyone who says I didn't, they're calling me a liar, and that we're not going to get along well. But what I will say, regardless of whatever y'all's positions are, I'll speak vehemently and sometimes with a little bit of passion myself. I lost a lot of Facebook friends in the early days when I was like evangelizing atheism, and I hated that I did it that way. I wished I could go back and do it differently. But it's important that I don't want to offend. If I don't think y'all seem really cool when we met, and I don't think you'll be hurt if I say something that doesn't jive with you. But just wanted to mention that I want to be respectful of other people's beliefs if they don't align with mine. As far as the hell argument, it really was, trying to reconcile an all-loving God with eternal torment. I grew up believing in a fire and brimstone hell. I never had another concept of hell. That's why maybe Rob Bell's idea was kind of attractive, because I'm like that God makes more sense, like to be all loving. You also hear, of course, you also have to be just. But there's no definition of justice for committing finite crimes that would require infinite torture. There's just no universe that would accept that. And you could even say, God is different. Yeah, but we're not. And he made us and established the rules if he exists. And I just couldn't come to terms with that. And as an atheist, my grandfather, who also just passed away a couple months ago, he was an evangelist, lovely man. I loved him dearly and respected the work that he did, even though I disagreed with it. He was a letter writer. He would write letters and send them all the time. It's a lost art, and he would do it just as long as he could. And one of the last letters he sent me, it was anonymous. He didn't put his name on it, but it was very clearly from my grandfather. There was no doubt about it. And, he just in that letter was pleading and saying how heaven was not going to be as sweet if I wasn't there. And my grandfather at that time was only about a year or so away from death. And it crushed me. It broke my heart to know that other people were burdened and hurting because of something I just didn't believe. And so it's like more than just my own personal belief. It's also knowing that you're kind of sort of in a way responsible for how other people feel about you and are hurting. And I hate that. Like that part really sucks.
Yeah, that's when I became an atheist, I didn't tell hardly anyone. I was dating a girl. I had to tell her because she was still a Christian, but she's the only person I told for years. And other than other people I dated who ended up breaking up for that later on too. But the main reason I never said it was for that reason right there, is that I was never worried about my folks, like disowning me, which a lot of people do have to worry about. Yep. But I didn't want them losing sleep at night, worried that their son might be burning in hell one day. I didn't want to put them through that, and until my hand was eventually forced. So yeah, that does cause a lot. When you finally did have this realization, so how old were you at this time? You were a youth pastor, or in church. Like, how old were you when this deconversion officially happened?
It's actually pretty easy for me to remember the date because my current place of employment, I've been there for 11 and a half years. And the deconversion happened shortly before I started working there.
Okay. Wow.
It's been about 12 years since, my faith was gone.
Okay. Also, I wanted to comment on this too, that I too was an asshole Facebook atheist. Oh my God. It's so cringy looking back.
Probably what attracted me to you back then, because I'm like, oh, cool. He's also an asshole atheist. I got to talk to TJ about this.
It was brutal, man. It's like, although I only feel like 50% bad for it, because everything I said, I was right, but I'm just saying that I could have been a little more. But then again, there's very few tactful ways to say this is bullshit. Like, it's hard. Like, it's very tricky to do something like that. But when this did happen to you, did you immediately tell everyone? So you were married at the time. So you're like, how did you break it to your family and friends and everything?
Like I said, we're coming up on 19 years, and this happened 12 years ago. So we were pretty deep into the marriage
it was
when that came out. What I'll mention about that process, you said you kind of kept it to yourself. That wasn't an option for me because I was in ministry. Like I was the youth pastor that had left the church, and I stopped going to church. And my wife especially was like, you have to tell my family and you have to tell your family because I can't lie for you. Yeah. And my families are very close. So we'd go to birthday parties all the time, and like somebody in the family would pray before we would eat. And so it was not an option. I wanted to. I thought nobody needs to know. It's nobody's business. But I was being pretty naive because it's like, and it put my wife in an unfair position where she had to pretend, that wasn't the case. So I wished I could have kept it quiet, but I didn't have that choice. As far as when I, did, obviously it was very difficult for my wife. I felt really bad for her because it was like she got a real catch-22, where like, hey, you married a believer and now I'm not. And that made me very sad because I'm like, my mom, when I told them, it did not go well. We have a great relationship, though. I think it actually, so I'm using my iPhone for my camera. I'd never really done this before. And my mom actually called. And I think that's what interrupted the video stream.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what happened. My mom called. I've got a really good relationship with my mom and dad. I'm very blessed because I'm blessed and highly favored, to use a Bible term.
Nice.
It was. I still have a good relationship with my folks, but when I told my mom and dad, and my mom said, "Why? Like, is Elizabeth going to leave you?" She said, "Is your wife going to leave?" And I was like, "No." I was like, I can't say what's going to happen in the future, but right now we're committed to this marriage. And she's like, I would leave your father in a heartbeat if he pulled what you're pulling. That's what my mom told me. And my only response is, I believe that love is more powerful than religion. And so I think we can make it. And we've done okay. We've got 3 kids. We definitely disagree on some things. They're actually up at camp. At Christian camp up in northern Wisconsin. TJ, you probably know the camp. And part of that bothers me because I know that they're going to be trying to, convert those kids. That's why there's places that exist.
About that.
and I hate indoctrination with a passion. So, I mean, there's going to be some tough times, but, we've done okay. I lost a lot of friends, and not even ones that were just like, screw you, man, I'm not talking to you anymore. It was more of just they kind of disappeared. We didn't really have anything. We didn't have that one thing in common anymore. And that part was hard. Carlo, when you touched on like the difficulty of that is so real. Because one thing that organized religion does, whether it's IFB or whatever, is they do community really well.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you're not in those movements, you have to kind of own that and try to make community work in a different way. But they do that well. And so it feels like a divorce, because you just lose so many different, friends and family occasionally. But I'm very lucky with my family. I will say that they've continued to be, they don't support me in the sense they agree with me. They probably pray every day for me, and I appreciate their thoughts, but we're still close as a family, which I'm thankful.
Yeah. So you mentioned how you didn't have a choice. Well, I don't know about that, because like one of the things is when you talk about how a lot of the posts I made, you were drawn to them because you identify with them. This happened a lot. It happened a lot over the years. I've gotten several messages from people who are either married or like they're deacons, or they're highly involved in a church or something like that, maybe an assistant pastor, something like that, and they don't tell anyone because they're like, I might lose my family over this, and the church is how I make my living, and they do live the lie. Now, how they do that, I don't know. Like it would eat me alive. I couldn't do that very long. Like it would like shorten my life if I did something like that. And like you and I, we're incredibly fortunate to have families that did accept our our beliefs, or however they were. Like in Kai's testimony, I remember she talked about. So Kai, if you don't mind, like with Justin, because I remember you said that your family, you guys have like a strained relationship. Was that over the religion thing? Because it was like when you were like 18 or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I was 18 when I got kicked out for very dumb, asinine reasons. And it kind of like that definitely fractured the relationship. But then like the way things progressed and like the decisions that my parents made around that, I think like didn't help. And then like things got better, and then they whatever. And now we just don't talk. But it's not necessarily related to the church. It kind of is, but it's more of like related to like my upbringing and like setting boundaries that I'm not going to get into it all in here. We can talk off. But I think getting kicked out of the church and my house at 18 definitely like fractured it. And then I've just gone in a different direction. Like I'm still a Christian. I still go to church. I'm just not IFB or anything close to it. So my parents, it's definitely part of it's probably like because of the IFB, but also there's a lot more to it than that. So that really like connects the dots there.
But no, it's fine. I just couldn't remember, like, because I know you had left the IFB, and I couldn't remember if that's what would cause the schism. But it was like I think it
started it.
Yeah, it seems like it was tangentially related, if nothing else. And so also, I don't remember when I found this out, because I knew you were married, and I didn't know if Elizabeth felt the same way or anything. And then I saw some post. I remember I was like, and where it was very clear, or you said something like that, and I was like, oh wow, because I expected, I was like, oh, is that going to work? With the whole, and I don't think I can think of another example. Actually, I can't think of another example of someone I know who was in the situation that, and you've like been at this for over a decade. Like you guys are going really strong here. And like, that's, I don't want to say commendable, like attaboy, that's not what I mean, but it's like, it like hearing that your mom said that, it didn't surprise me that she said that, because that's the reaction I would expect from most believers, married or otherwise. And I'm not saying it would be easy, but it wouldn't shock me if and when that happens to people. Like, oh yeah, well, I know the rules, don't be unequally yoked and everything. So like that's amazing.
Yeah, and I would take an attaboy, because I think like any relationship, it takes two, right? And I want to make it work. I try to be respectful. Over the years, like initially, if there was like any comment or anything about like religion or Christianity at all, my wife just couldn't talk to me about it. It was just too sensitive. It was too soon. But over the years, like we're able to dialogue around certain topics. And I feel in a lot of ways kind of privileged because I've been in both camps. So I can understand where folks are coming from because I was there. Like that was my life. That was everything. And so, we'll both joke and have agreements on like, the Southern Baptist church movement or the mega churches, we'll make fun of those things and we both can get along on that topic because we're like, Joel Osteen is just, what a total fraudster. We can talk about that kind of stuff. I even remember, and this is with my in-laws, who also are very wonderful. I love them, and they're great people. They're really great in-laws. I remember once we were on vacation, like the whole family gets together about once a year, and we usually will go to just a local church wherever we are, and it's always kind of fun because you don't know what you're going to get. It's like chocolates. And so I remember one time we went to this little church. We were on vacation in Virginia, I think, somewhere, some cabin or something. And we went to this little church, and it was rough. I'm sitting there as an atheist, and I'll listen and I'll take notes and I'll kind of like, debate in my mind while I'm listening to the pastor. But it was rough, even by like Baptist standards. And after it was over, I kind of made the joke. I said, you know what? I think even the atheist in this family could have preached a better sermon than he did. My mother and father-in-law laughed. It's like I'm sure they were probably crying on the inside, but they, it's like, you can joke about things. But yeah, I am extremely fortunate. And Elizabeth, it took her too. She wanted to make it work, and she's awesome. I want this to last as long as it can, and I don't have any reason to think it's going to change. So anytime soon. So.
Oh, that's. I do want to say you're being far too modest. Like I guarantee a lot of atheists could preach dynamite sermons. I mean, I'm positive we could. I'm positive we could. I don't see that being a huge issue at all. What have you seen? I don't think I told you this question was coming, but what have you seen as in trends when it comes to people who grew up like us and where they end up? Of course, it's all over the place. But like, for example, one thing I've noticed in more or less I haven't been to a church service in a long time, but I've seen the familiar trappings and the messaging. Because when all of us were little, like Carla, you mentioned the fire and brimstone preaching. I see a lot less of that these days. I see a whole lot less of that, like almost never. And that was always the main selling point, back in the 90s and early 2000s. Like, it was fire insurance. Hey, you don't want to go to hell, right? So accept this free gift of Jesus Christ, accept him into your heart and all that. But now it's kind of more like, hey, come to this church and develop a close personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and that will enhance your life and make it better. And the hell stuff comes. It's like Scientology. Like, the hell stuff comes later. Like the stuff that's harder to stomach seems to be pushed later on. Have you seen that? Because I've seen a lot more of this, obsequious, ingratiating version of Christianity than existed, any time in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, societies evolve, cultures evolve, people evolve, things change. I mean, it's a lot of the jokes that we were all saying that we have in common. It's so different now, just with the invention of the internet. It brings people together, and it gives more perspective. And we didn't have that growing up because we just had what we were surrounded by, and so there wasn't. There wasn't really an option just because where we were born, and but yeah, like you, I've been to some church services. Like if I go with my folks or somebody, and yeah, I don't hear as much of that just because socially it's not as acceptable. The churches that continue to do that, I'll give them props for sticking to what they believe in. Right?
That's what I said. That's funny. I said the exact same thing.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And this is it's like, how do I word this, or how do I say this without without sounding like a bigot. I'm not a bigot.
Oh, no.
I can say that. I know I'm afraid. Like, how do I say this? You know, when you have churches, I don't even know if Baptist churches, and definitely not IFB churches, I don't guess, you know, where they will, have gay marriage ceremonies. They allow that in their church. And then you have the other churches who, that's a sin, that's wrong. Oh, you can't do that. Again, in a weird way, it's like, well, looking at the scripture, like
one is being right. I know, it's like
so not that I don't like that. They should be able to marry whoever you want to marry, but from like the authority of the church, you know, it's like you either have to change and lighten up a little bit, or you're probably going to close. I do believe that that the religious, especially you know, Baptist, independent, fundamental Baptist. It's one of the fastest shrinking groups in the country and in the world because they're not evolving with culture, and it's just a matter of time before, you know, they die off, literally.
Literally, yeah, you're right,
yeah. So yeah, absolutely. I think they have to change. They have to evolve, or they won't survive.
Yeah, was it? Kai, were you? I've lost track of like who was here for each episode. Like we rotate sometimes, but was it all four of us that did an episode about the Southern Baptist Convention, or was were either of you there for that?
I think it was me and Kayla.
Oh, it was me and Kayla.
Or maybe we talked about it. Did we actually do it?
Okay. Oh, maybe. I can't remember. Well, the Southern Baptist Convention met. Did you guys talk about that, Justin, a few months ago? It was in Indianapolis, and they had
about women preachers.
Yes. They had a vote on women preachers, and it was like by one vote they allowed women preachers or something like that. Oh, and they also voted on the Nicene Creed, which I thought was weird because did any of you guys ever learn the Nicene Creed as Baptists? I never did. I knew what it was, but I never had to memorize it.
Yeah, I didn't have to memorize.
Yeah,
when I got to college, I knew about it, but I didn't memorize it.
Yeah, and so they were voting on whether or not they should recite the Nicene Creed during Southern Baptist church sermons, and they voted it down. They said, no, we're not going to do that because we're not Catholics. So get out of here. But you know what they do? They did at the conference every day? The Pledge of Allegiance. They did that every day, which I found very funny that, you know, it's kind of devolved into this civic religion. But you kind of answered the next question I was going to ask is like, one thing that we like to do, Kayla reminds me of this all the time, that where the point of the show is not to gun for religion in general. And, you know, they got to kind of rein me in sometimes for doing that. But it's like, that's not the point. Like, the point is, I got Kai's nodding. The point is that the pernicious nature of independent fundamental Baptist, you know, cult in general. And so outside of outside of like what you mentioned of the, you know, the strict adherence to these, you know, ancient rules that they're trying to apply to modern society. What are some of the negative effects that you specifically find from, you know, this particular version of Christianity? And it's a stretch to even call it Christianity. It really is, because it's like it's mainly worshiping like conservative American white supremacist culture. Like that's what it is. Actually, is. It's not really Christianity, you know, and money and capitalism, which is really funny when you read the works of Jesus. Like I challenge you to find one nice thing Jesus ever said about rich people. Like he shit on rich. He spent 3 years just constantly shitting on rich people. But, you know, independent fundamental Baptists can't get enough of saying how great rich folks are. But so from your experience,
because they're tithers.
That's a good reason. That's a very good reason they're always on that. But you know, outside that, is there anything like in particular that you find you know, noticeably unsettling about the IFB movement?
I wouldn't have time probably to go through it. I just, even when I was in that environment, it just seemed like so much time was wasted over things that didn't matter. Like that was just always my biggest complaint. And the churches that I went to that, you know, were really more about the clothes you wear, the music you listen to. Those churches, ironically, did very little community outreach or giving or charities or fundraisers. They were more concerned about if you wore pants and you were a woman than feeding the poor or taking care of so that has always been concerning. Now there may be, I definitely don't want to just blanket all of them. There may be some that independent fundamental Baptist churches that are that do that a lot, but so much of it comes with baggage. It's like, hey, we're going to go and we're going to deliver food, but we're also going to be preaching to all of them, and you have to have both elements there. It couldn't just be to give. Actually, I was just talking to my grandmother. This is just like 2 or 3 days ago. We were talking about the homeless population, where I live, High Point, Greensboro, Winston area, and it's just it's everywhere. It's heartbreaking. But we were talking about that, and the do you give, do you not give? And my grandma probably liked this because I referenced something that I had said as a believer, and I told her, I said, in the Bible, Jesus doesn't say, give to the poor, but make sure that it's to like an organization, so they're not going to buy alcohol or drugs. Like, Jesus said, make sure that you give your money to, make sure you vet it, make sure they don't waste it on things. No, he just said, give to the poor. Like there was no requirements to it. Feed your neighbor. It was pretty straightforward. It wasn't our responsibility to do the vetting. It was our responsibility to just give. And unfortunately, there are way too many churches that don't take that key and move forward with it. If they did, I'd be a lot more tolerant of their existence.
Be a lot less complaining about church if they did stuff like that. I know that's one of Kai's big issues there about churches focusing on things that just don't matter. I was thinking that was like Kai's wheelhouse. I saw her nod. I was like, oh yeah, I know she's got something to add to this.
Well, because like I remember being a teenager in youth group, and like they want all these people to come to church, and they make all these big pushes for like new people and whatever. But oh, by the way, I literally, in our youth group room, they had like a box of clothes, and it was always for the girls. And if they weren't wearing the right thing, they would make them put on a different shirt or make them put on a skirt. And the legalism in the rules of like the IFB, it doesn't match what. No,
I said they probably didn't come back.
Why would you? If you're like, why would you? And like, show me in the Bible where like Jesus didn't accept the people for who they were. Like, you can't find it. Like, it's not in there. That he only like behaved sometimes. Like, so it used to irritate shit out of me because I would be like, what? Like, that's when I like the older I got, I would be like, that's not right. Like, or when people would come, like, if they didn't look right or whatever right, like they would add them to the prayer list or they would sit by themselves. And I'm like, this isn't right. This isn't what right looks like. And I think that's when I really started getting irritated. Like I remember there was like a pregnant teenager that came to youth group and like she literally sat by herself and they're like, don't talk to her. She's a bad influence. And I'm like, okay.
Yikes.
Okay. And so I get real like,
hey, well, I can be a good influence.
Around, like,
yeah.
Right.
Like why?
Right. And not to mention, if you're already a pregnant teenager, like this is like 2007, 2008, like before, like I guess like having kids outside of wedlock is more normalized than it is now, right? Like I don't know. I just get really TJ's right. It really just irks me the wrong way because all these rules. I'm like, it literally is in the Bible, and you cannot show me where it says it is. Like Jesus literally sat with the sinners, like and like the whores of the town and the criminals. So like, but you want to make people change clothes so they can just be at church? Like, I'm not okay with that. I'm not. Makes me angry. I get a little passionate about some things sometimes, and
that's why we're here. What were you going to say, Carla?
People in the face. Yes, Carla. Very sorry. I don't want to punch you. I love you. You're beautiful.
I was just piggybacking off of what you said. It's just like, why preach to youths like we're supposed to take care of people, we want them to be saved, blah blah blah, but then a pregnant teenager comes in and you're telling said youth to separate from her and not even go near her? That's so contradicting. That's another big thing I didn't like about just church in general, and how contradicting and just hypocritical about the smallest thing.
Yes. Like, oh, we want you to be a Christian and come to church, but only if you check these boxes. If you don't check these boxes, we're going to put you in a different box, and you're definitely not going to feel welcome. Like,
I remember
angry.
The church that I was a youth pastor. I was a youth pastor at 2 churches, but the last one that I was at, I had a friend of mine,
but not a creepy youth pastor.
Yeah, no, not
God damn it, Kai.
Absolutely not. No. I had a friend of mine dressed like a homeless person. It was a relatively small church. I don't know. There may have been 100, 200 people there. Not huge. But I had him dress as though he were homeless. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like a plant. Had him come to the service and sit down in the middle. He did something to his like jacket and stuff, so it kind of smelled bad. And the whole point of that was to see how people would react. That's what I did at my church. And I was really proud because most of them talked to him. You know, a lot didn't, but a lot did. And then it was almost like a game show at the end of the service. Like, hey, Dave, stand up there in the middle. It's like, Dave's my friend, and he dressed like this, and whatever. He kind of made a moment out of it. But it is sad when you see people treating others in just the complete opposite way that their book is telling them to treat people. But that's just the
and they can't justify it. They can't justify, and they're like, "Oh, Jesus said, be of the world, but not in the world."
In the world, not of the world.
So when he went down, that's what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Yeah.
But like, it really makes me mad.
Yeah.
I cannot stand it.
And it's
in the face.
They do it.
Not you. Oh, sorry, Guy, the creepy one. I'm just talking about how I want to punch IFB youth pastors in the face.
And they do it. Like Kai's example was great with the pregnant teenagers. Like, that's an easy one. They're like, oh yeah, ostracized immediately. Like, you're 15 and you're pregnant, get the fuck out of here. Go sit in the corner and stuff. They do it to like church members who are divorcees. I saw that plenty of times where, you have a divorce on your record. All right, well, you're in the church, but don't expect to, get any teaching positions. You're not going to be anything. You're going to be barred from that. And this is actually the one I saw the most. The one group of people who I saw shit on consistently, bus kids. Bus kids were treated like 100%. Fucking animals. They were just like, nope, cordon them off. Make sure you keep an eye on them. Don't let them see the silverware, and just like hide them in the back and everything. It was just like they were treated like a burden. And Kayla was a bus kid. That's what I was thinking, because she was like her mom would send her and her sister, and a lot of times like I felt bad for those kids because, a lot of them were sent there because their parents wanted an afternoon away from the kids, and I'm sure people can understand that, but it's like the lesson you're trying to send there made no sense to me. That church is important for you, not for me. I just need you to get out of the house for a while. Like, that doesn't seem like it would translate well. And then you get there, and the people in the church treat you like a burden. They treat you like an annoyance, and you're going to remember that. Like, you think they're going to want to come back to their church on their own free will later on. So, yeah, it's just a lot of small things that are just basic human decency that you would figure a church would figure out pretty early on. And, commiserating with the dregs of societies, like the people who, oh my God, they use drugs and they're promiscuous. It's like, all right, you won't hang out with them. I will. I'll happily do it. But it's just kind of unfortunate that they're like that. So that's all the questions I have. Do you guys want to add any more questions for Justin that you had while we're here?
I wrote this down. You said it earlier on in the podcast, but you mentioned something about putting on a different hat depending on the environment you were in. So,
good one.
I guess this can apply to every stage of life you were in while you were in church, but specifically when you were like in college. When you went to college, did you feel like you had to put a face on while you were there? And then when you went back home for like Christmas or something, you felt like you could breathe a little bit? Or did you still have to adhere by rules and like kind of hide who you truly were? Or did you feel comfortable to be Justin at home and then put on a face? Or even as a youth pastor, being a youth pastor and then finally back at home or out in the real world, just being like regular old Justin Fain?
This is a good question. I like this one too. That's a really good one.
Yeah, I don't think you think, okay, you have your professional version, you go to your job, and I've had my wife tell me before, if I'm talking on the phone and it's work related, she's like, there's your work voice, right? Like the work voice sounds different. I mean, even this, like I'm sure I'm speaking a little differently here than I maybe would in a different environment, but I've always tried to stay myself in that. It's just because even at those churches and the school and everything, where the pants and the music and everything. I mean, at Maranatha, I brought my ream of CDs that didn't pass. And I would hide them. I don't know if you call that a hat. That I was just trying to blend in or play the game necessarily. Like I liked. I know this TJ, this will blow your mind, but I enjoyed my time at Maranatha for the most part.
Yeah, me too.
And okay, cool. I mean, there was a lot of good people in it, but especially compared to Pensacola, it was like that was fresh air. So it's like, I don't know if it was putting on a hat or it was just adapting to the environment that I had to adapt to.
Yeah.
My core beliefs during that time didn't really change. My Brapsis from what Baptist history was.
Baptist heritage,
yeah.
Brapsis, yeah.
There's
like a book series like Our Baptist Heritage with like different volumes of it.
Yep.
Sorry, I haven't thought about that in years, and you said that.
Me neither. Wow.
And I have a terrible memory. The things that I can remember is really strange. But it's like I don't think I was being a different person. I just disagree, or my core beliefs didn't change that much. Funny story, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but one of the CDs that I had in my binder that the Dean of Men called me into the office about was it was Red Hot Chili Peppers' Californication album. And the Dean of Men, he was so and I liked him. I even though I was in there talking to him way more than I wanted to, I didn't mind him. And he was like, what is this? Like, what Christian should have it? And what I really wanted to say is like, that's actually a really good moral. It's saying that like people that go to Hollywood and they do these things, they change who they are and become bad people. And I was like, but I wasn't going to go into that. I was getting there. It wasn't going to change anything. So I don't know if that answered your question or not. But I'll quote Paul. I'll be all things to all men in order to win some. You have to do that. I quote the Bible a lot, actually. Ironically and unironically.
Same though. Same.
The Bible is incredibly quotable. It's great literature. Like it is amazing. It's amazing literature. I quote the Bible.
I prefer King James as well for that reason.
There you go.
Like,
yes.
How I memorize the verses.
Yeah,
I'm a King James only atheist.
I know, right? Yeah. I sent the girls an example of this. I can't remember what it was, but it was Isaiah, and that verse they used to that Christians use to say the Old Testament predicted Jesus. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace is upon him. And with his stripes we are healed. Fucking banger of a line right there. And I read
sounds like an opening scroll of a movie. It just sounds
great. It's so great. And I read like a modern version. It was like, he was hurt for our sins. And I was like, oh, get the fuck out of here. This is garbage. Like, give me the KJV. Let me hear the beauty of that, but of a man being torn to pieces. But anyway, so last thing I want to mention, this is just a side note here, that you brought up Brapsis, which I haven't heard of literally in 20 years. I've never heard that acronym since college. But Brapsis, I can't even remember what it stands for. It's like baptism, regeneration. I don't remember. But I just remember learning Brapsis, and it's like, okay, this is just a poor man's tulip. This is all Brapsis is. Like, tulip is fire. Like the Calvinists knocked it out of the park when they came up with tulip, and the Baptists were like, oh, we need to find some way to compete. No, bro, no one gives a fuck about Brapsis. It doesn't compete with tulip. But
I'm trying so hard to remember the points. I think A was autonomy of the local church.
Okay, all right, yeah,
which makes sense. But yeah, I'm blanking on some of the other ones. That's funny.
Yeah, it was, and I think priest of the believer. I think that was well, anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah, it doesn't. But anyway, any closing remarks you want to say, Justin, to everything? But we really appreciate you having you on tonight, man. But anything you want to?
Can I ask one question? Can I ask one question? I just had one. I think people who grow up in the IFC or the church, right? Like you're told that anyone who isn't like a believer, you're unequally yoked and stuff like that. I guess what is one? Because like we've all talked about like the whole goal of like doing this is to give people like a safe space, like a place that people can relate to and be like, oh, I'm not alone, right? Like because everyone's journey leaving the IFC is so different. So what is like one piece of advice that you would give someone who like is afraid that like their spouse is going to leave them, or to have that conversation, or what that looks like? What is one thing you would tell them? Like if you could go back and tell yourself.
I love that question so much. Thank you for asking it. The recommendation I would give, and I'm looking it up real quick because I think I have part of the answer right. There are organizations out there for folks who are in a situation where their livelihood depends on their ministry or their housing. When I was at Edgefield, part of my compensation, matter of fact, it may have been the entirety of my compensation was housing, because we lived in the parsonage, and so I'm confronted with like, how do I even explore this, because the roof over my head is at risk if I do this. There's an organization called the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I don't know if that's ever come up on the show before. But I'm pretty sure there is another organization, I can't remember, but I think you can find it through them, where if you have questions, if you're afraid to talk to somebody, or you don't have anybody to talk to, you're kind of a closeted atheist, or whatever, or it doesn't even have to be atheism. It could be, I don't agree with these lines, that my church is going through. They actually will do counseling. It doesn't cost anything. I actually interviewed to join that group in the early days of kind of my deconversion. And they're wonderful. They're just volunteers, and they're there to just support and help and give advice. And so I know that would have been, if I'd have known about that sooner, that would have been a big support for me. So Freedom from Religion Foundation, it's ffrf.org. It's a really great resource for folks that feel like they can't talk to anybody about what they're going through.
Oh, that's cool. Excellent question. Yeah, that's great. I've heard of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I didn't know that they offered support in that way. That's pretty cool. That could be literally life-saving to somebody, going through that. So yeah.
Sure.
All right.
Especially if you have a family, right? Like, and you're so used to being like, I feel like as the guy, especially like how we were raised, like you're supposed to be the provider for your family and stuff. Like, and like the thought of like being who you are could potentially change the ability for you to provide for your family is like a very real fear. Like I'm not a guy. I don't want to speak to that, but so I think if people know about resources like that, I think that's really important. So
yeah, for sure.
That's good shit. All right. Well, Justin, any final thoughts you have for the crew here? That was fantastic.
No, I don't think. I've had a blast. I really appreciate it, and I hope. I'm gonna have to look up, because I haven't seen. I've seen a lot of the posts and things you do, JT, but I haven't seen this. What was the name of the?
So the name of our podcast is the Kids from It podcast. Now,
we're all traumatized.
Yeah, like Stephen King. Yeah, and so
now I wondered if it's good.
It's gonna be hard to find. I don't know if you guys have tried to look up the podcast on YouTube. It's hard. If you find the Kids from It, you will get everything but us.
It really is.
It is. And so the only way I can find it is if I type in the kids from It and like a name, like I type in Joel Webbin's name or something. And then because we did a video on him or something. We're a very new podcast. We have like 9 episodes. We have like 200.
But we have 200 something subscribers.
We have 200.
We're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, which I mean, that's tiny, but it's more than I would have guessed we had after 2 months. I got to tell you,
I'm out of time that grew like that. That's really cool.
Yeah. And we don't even do it every week. We're trying. Now we're actually getting on it, but we keep gallivanting and stuff. But anyway, back to
I'm like, you gotta have a plan.
Yeah. But yeah, man, thanks so much for coming on here, man. It was great. It was good catching up and everything. And, sharing these stories is fantastic. It's what we live for. And if you ever want to come on again sometime, let me know. We'll gladly have you on.
I've had a blast. Maybe next time I'll bring my wife and we can have like point counterpoint. Like it could
I don't want to couples therapy. Oh no.
That would be good.
Really cool. Okay,
that would be really cool.
Really cool.
Yeah, I don't know if I can get her to, but I mean, yeah, she knows I'm doing this, and she
have some time to think about it.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll mention
and then it's kind of cool because there's no way you guys are like the only couple that are going that have gone through this, and like it's probably more common than people would realize. So like, I think it could be really dope.
It can work. It
won't be the only Christian. So.
Yeah, I mean, relationships are tough. Even if you agree with everything, it's still really hard. So it's just hard for different reasons. But I know I really appreciate it. It was nice meeting you, Carla and Kai, and TJ. Good seeing you again, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it. When you sent me that message asking if I do this, I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's do this. I love talking. I love talking shop.
That's good shit. All right, I'm gonna end the recording right here.